بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم لا حول ولا قوة الا بالله العلی العظیم الحمد لله رب العالمین و صلی الله علی سیدنا و نبینا ابی القاسم المصطفى محمد و آله الطیبین الطاهرین لا سیما بقیة الله فی الارضین عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف اللهم اخرجني من ظلمات الوهم واكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا ابواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. خب alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of Usul-e Falsafeh و Ravesh-e Realism by the late علامه طباطبایی. We are continuing our study of the fourth article, مقاله چهارم. As you remember, in the introduction to this fourth essay, the late Ayatollah Mutahhari has a very informative introduction, and later he has also comments like other parts. We reached point 7, and that is whether haqiqat or truth is relative or non-relative or absolute. To say absolute is possible, and some people say absolutism in contrast to or versus relativism, but absolutism can be understood in different ways, so sometimes people say relativism and non-relativism. خب, some of the thinkers, they believe in relativism with respect to all kinds of truths. As I mentioned in the book Ethical Relativism, I have discussed as one of the foundations for ethical relativism a kind of general relativism. So some people, because they believe all kinds of truths are relative, when it comes to ethics, also they say ethics is not an exception. Some people, no, they say we don't believe in relativism with respect to all kinds of beliefs, etc. We just say in relativism with respect to ethics, for example. So they have different arguments, different foundations. But one way to believe in ethical relativism is to believe in relativism in general. In any case, Ayatollah Mutahhari says there are people who deny that truths are non-relative or are absolute, and they believe in relative truth, and they are called relativists. He says the idea of these people in brief is that the quiddity of things, mahiyya, chisti, whatness, or quiddity or nature of things that we try to discover through sciences, they can never be available to us completely. They can never be discovered by us completely. What we understand is the result of what they are in themselves and circumstances, time, space, other things, and our own faculties of understanding. So it's like a triangle. For example, when I study nature, nature has a reality, but that reality, they say, is not available to me. What I understand about the nature is shaped by nature itself, by circumstances, and by my faculties for understanding. and we don't know how much each contributes. So, therefore, they say even one person at different times may have different understanding, let alone different human beings. Or even so, for example, different types of animals. Some animals don't have ability to understand colors. For them, everything is gray, different degrees of gray. They don't have this concept of, red, yellow, blue, purple, etc. Maybe there are things that also we don't understand. Or maybe even these colors, as we will mention later, as some scientists say, it's the way that our perception understand things. Maybe outside there is no color in this way. Maybe there are things that lead to having this kind of understanding. Yeah. So certainly something which is red and something which is green in our understanding, in their appearance to us, must be different. But is the difference that they have these colors, or the difference is that they produce different, for example, waves of light, etc.? In any case, some people deny the ability of human beings to discover the realities as they are. But what they say is that instead of saying we cannot understand, like early skeptics, they say we understand, but truth is relative. You understand it right now in this way, that's true for you. You understand it differently at another time, that's also true for you in that condition, that framework. If someone else has another understanding, that's true for him. If animals have another understanding, it's true for them. So basically they say there is no one single truth. So we have different kinds of truth. They don't want to say we have shack, and we doubt reality. We are skeptical. So, as I said, they try to support their ideas with reference to some scientific findings, like the role of our nervous system, etc. For example, about the color, as I mentioned, or about taste of food. Sometimes even you yourself, when you are ill, you have different taste. Or sometimes, for example, some fragrance we enjoy, sometimes the same fragrance we don't enjoy, things like this. Ayatollah Mutahhari says, این مسلک هرچند به ادله جدیدی از تحقیقات دانشمندان جدید مجهز شده، ولی از لحاظ نتیجه و مدلول عین مسلک شکاکان است. This school, this kind of thought, although it's equipped with new evidence from scientific, findings, but the result is the same as the school of skepticism. Pyrrhon was a famous person in ancient Greece who believed in skepticism. So he used to argument. People used to bring different arguments, but basically all of them were to say that human beings have different understanding compared to animals. Human beings have different understandings compared to each other, And even a human being, the same person, can have different understandings based on different conditions. Okay? So between us and animals, between different individuals, and even one individual in different conditions, they can have different understanding. So his conclusion was, we shouldn't believe that what we understand is truth. We should look at all our understandings with some kind of doubt. But the modern relativists, they say, no, whatever we understand and who anyone understands is true, just relatively true. So they don't want to say we should have question mark. Ayatollah Mutahhari says this is wrong. Those were better understanding, that they said, we are skeptical. Because relative truth doesn't have any meaning. It's absurd. Truth is truth. Either it is there or not. What does it mean, relative truth? The truth is to correspond to reality. Either it corresponds or not. And reality is one thing. Reality cannot be for every person or for human beings and animals different. There is one reality, one common reality. Either we understand or not. He says, for example, when two people see something in different ways, that thing in itself, or nafsul amr, as we discussed before, either has the quality that number A has perceived, or quality B, or none of them, but has one quality. Cannot say A is right, B is right too. Some people like Berkeley, they said the reason for non-existence of these things is that we have different opinions. He has made another false conclusion. He says because we have different understandings, there is no reason to say that there is something outside. اختلاف ادراکات را دلیل بر عدم وجود خارجی مدرکات دانست. So because person A, person B can have different understanding of, for example, the flower that we see outside. So there is no such a flower. It's just the work of their mind, for example. Some people like Descartes and John Locke, they say our differences in understanding are not about every aspect of external things. It's about their second properties. They make distinction between primary properties and secondary properties. Inshallah, we'll talk about it. So second properties, they say, are just made by our mind, like color and smell. But relativists say our understanding is not without something outside. There is something outside, and our understanding is shaped by what is outside and what is our faculty doing, and the conditions, time, space, etc. But our understanding doesn't 100% correspond to what is outside. But it's still true. True for me. If someone has another understanding, true for him as well. Relative truth. Then he says, those who believed in dialectical materialism, also they try to say something like relativists, because they don't want to be called skeptical. So he says, inshallah, in the process of studying this article, we will talk about these things, and we will have more detailed discussion. But he says we need to make few points as introductory points. Some of them are reminders, some of them are maybe new. So before we enter the text by Allame Tabatabai and comments by Ayatollah Mutahari, still he has some points to mention. He says in the second article it was mentioned, and it will also come in the fifth article, that this is very important thing, that our mind has ability to grasp mahiyah, quiddity or whatness of things in an absolute way. Has ability to grasp mahiyah of things, to understand them as they are. Fil jumle, not bil jumle. We don't say we can understand everything, but there is such a possibility, there is such a capability that mind can understand things as they are in an absolute or non-relative way. And another thing that we said, and we will discuss again, is that there are things that our mind can be positive about, them can be decisive, we can have yaqeen and certainty. It's not that we should always be doubtful. So, this is our main claim. Now we mention few points. Number one, he says all the scientists or scholars that somehow we want to say that some of our idrakat, some of our understandings or perceptions are relative, are not absolute, and they say that because of the impact of our brain and nervous system or mind, we are not able to understand things as they are in themselves, etc. He says they should be included among shakkakan, among skeptics, because they really don't know. They say it's truth, relative truth, but they don't know. So he said those who were shakkak, they were very much afraid of being considered as Sufists. But in reality, we find that the modern relativists are also like shakkakan. They are hesitant to be called shakkak. Shakkak were hesitant to be considered as Sufis, but now relativists also are hesitant to be called shakkak. And inshallah, we will have a beautiful discussion soon. He will mention about who were considered to be philosophers. Point two. Some Danishman means scholar, scientist, etc. Can be translated different. They say the truth, which is result of experience and empirical knowledge, is not producing certainty. And still they call it haqiqat nisbi, relative truth. In contrast to mathematical truth, which has certainty. and they say it is absolute truth. So what we understand through empirical method is حقیقت نسبی, is relative truth, and it is احتمالی, it's based on probability and likelihood. What we understand in mathematics is absolute truth and has certainty. And we don't have problem that in some of the sciences there might be no certainty, there might be probability and likelihood. But the thing is that we say human beings fil jumle, so as موجبه جزئیه, they have ability to understand certain things with certainty. Then he says, what is discussed in philosophy as relativism, which is about our understanding, is different from what we have, for example, in physics, the theory of relativism, which was introduced by Einstein. That's different kind of relativism. We are not talking about that. That is something that can be accepted, and it doesn't mean that we become skeptical about the realities of the world. Now he says it's good if we have a quick review of some of the positions, some of the opinions in this regard from early Greece up to today's world. Of course, he says we don't refer to philosophers in India and China. So it's mostly from Greece and then Europe and Muslim world, etc. But if we want to have a comprehensive discussion, we should also have discussion about what philosophers in East also thought. Sheikh Ishraq in some of his works, mentioned, or maybe all his work, sometimes he mentions the idea of ancient, for example, philosophers of Persia, etc. About the 5th century before Christ, as you know, Greece had great situation when it comes to civilization and culture and philosophy. It was very much developed and flourished. It had flourished. There were different thinkers, different currents, etc. When some people were faced with this diversity of opinions, ideas, attitudes, which were also sometimes coming from outside, and also, as we find in some other books, that when there were legal issues and there were lawyers who were very capable, but unfortunately sometimes they used their skills to prove that someone who is guilty is not guilty, is innocent, or someone who is innocent is guilty. So some people started doubting whether there is something as reality, whether there is a possibility of finding reality, if it is there, etc. So Sufis came to existence. According to them, we don't know the world exists, and even if it exists, the external world, we don't have ability to discover, to understand it. Ayatollah Mutahhari says, تمام ادراکات و آراء و عقاید بشری حتی بدیهیات اولیه را باطل و خیال محض دانستند. They said all human understanding and ideas and beliefs, even primary self-evident propositions, بدیهیات اولیه, they said they are all false. They are just our own fantasy, our own, imagination. And they had no value, no regard for any thinking, any understanding. And they thought it is هیچ در هیچ, means totally nothing. Nothing in nothing. خب, to face and challenge this, people like Socrates, like Aristotle, they made great efforts. And they managed to show fallistic reasoning that these people had. They managed to show that our understanding is not 0 in 0. And human beings have ability to understand things as they are. If we use our fikr, our thinking and reasoning properly, we can understand the reality as it is. This is why Aristotle tried to not invent but compile logic, mantiq. Because as you know, logic is an instrument. Although it is a kind of discipline, but it is alatun qanuniyah. It is something that serves for all our other understandings that we have. And if we follow it, it helps us from making mistake in our reasoning or definition. آلة قانونية تعصم مراعاتها الذهن عن الخطأ في الفكر. If you observe it, if you don't observe it, no. If you observe it, it protects our mind from khata, from mistake, from error. In logic, we have two subject matters, mu'arrif and hujjat. Mu'arrif is for tasawwurat, hujjat is for tasdiqat. In both cases, we need logic. And Aristotle had this idea that, this is also very important, he had this idea that we can use both mahsusat and ma'qulat. In Sana'atul Burhan, there are different types of reasoning. One is qiyas. We have qiyas, tamsil, istiqra. And then for qiyas, you can have different ways of forming qiyas based on the madde, the materials that you use, and the form of the qiyas. There are different ways. The best for philosophy, for when you want to understand the truth, is burhan, sana'atul burhan. Of course, we don't need to use burhan for every aspect of life. But if you want to establish truth, like philosophy, theology, we should follow burhan, we should apply burhan. When materials, premises are yaqini, the form is yaqini, everything is certain. خب برای تحصیل یقین به وسیله برهان به کار بردن محسوسات و معقولات هر دو را معتبر شمرد. Aristotle had this idea that in order to form a kind of deduction, qiyas, which is decisive, it's burhani, you can use mahsusat and ma'qulat. You can use propositions, knowledge that you understand through perceptions or through aql, both of them. You see that when they introduce to us yaqiniyat or badihiyat, to be more precisely. So badihiyat have 6 types. One of them is about the things that we can understand through perceptions and also things that we can experience. So هم برای ادراک حسی و هم برای ادراک عقلی ارزش یقینی قائل شد. Aristotle had the idea that both intellectual understanding and perceptions are possible to be certain. His dogmatism, which means a kind of philosophy which believes in certainty, was in this way established. Similar to them, the same time, then was skepticism. These were shakkak, people who used to doubt. This was a school and maybe was considered as a philosophy. Sufis didn't have any philosophy. They were against philosophy. Socrates introduced the concept of philosophies because Sufis said, we are scientists. He said, I am philosophy. I follow in philosophy. I love science and understanding and knowledge, but I am not knowledgeable. Anyway, Ayatollah Mutahari says, in the beginning, skepticism was something in middle, a kind of philosophical position between Sufism and the idea of dogmatism of Socrates and Aristotle, for example. So they didn't accept the idea of Sufis who said there is no reality outside our mind, and they didn't accept the idea of dogmatist philosophers like Aristotle who said that we can understand things as they are. They said what we understand is based on different factors and we can never be sure what is the reality as it is in itself. Pirhon was the founder of this kind of school. Although sometimes we consider Pirhon as a Sufist, but here Ayatollah Mutahari says we can consider him as a skeptic more than a Sufist. He had different arguments, and the core of it was that conditions of time and space, temporal conditions, different ages, and also different places in the world, they have impact. A structure of our senses and faculties for understanding have impact, and therefore we can never be 100% sure about things as they are. این جماعت گفتند راه صحیح برای انسان در جمیع مسائل خودداری از رأی جزمی است. They said that the right policy for human beings is not to say anything with certainty. In all scientific issues, in all philosophical issues, even in mathematics, we can only be doubtful. فلسفه شکاکان در مقابل فلسفه جزمی از اینجا پایگذاری شد. So this became a kind of philosophy which was founded in contrast to dogmatism, the philosophy which was based on possibility of achieving certainty. So he says, philosophers who believed in reality of the world, unlike Sufists who didn't believe that the world exists, they even question that. They are not considered as philosophers. But he says philosophers who believed in the reality behind our understandings, they were divided into two. Jazmiyun ya yaqiniyun, number one. Shakkakan, number two. Dogmatists who said it's possible to achieve knowledge which corresponds to the reality. In other words, they accepted that the human mind has ability to understand things as they are. They believed in logic and rules of logic, that if we follow, we can reach the truth. And the second group, Shakkakan, skeptics who denied that there is a reality, and they said our understanding is not certain. Dogmatist philosophers try to show that skepticism is not a philosophy, it is indeed another form of Sufism. They consider them as Sufism. As I said, sometimes Pirron is considered as Sufist. So, a philosopher then was a title reserved for only people who believed that the world exists outside us, and secondly, we can discover the world as it is. If you believed in these two, you are a philosopher. If you denied both or one of them, you are not a philosopher. So the definition of philosophy, even from earlier generations, was that you know the properties, characteristics of beings as they are, according to the capacity of human beings. They didn't say we can understand everything, but بقدر طاقة البشرية, as much as we can understand. And also they had this idea that a philosopher becomes a world similar to the external world. سيرورة الإنسان عالما عقلانيا مضاهيا للعالم العيني. Actually, in the discussion about insan kamil, also we have this discussion that according to, for example, some philosophers, kamal, perfection for human being, is to become such a world. In your knowledge, you have an identical, representation of the external world. You become a replica of the whole universe. هر آن کو ز دانش برد توشه‌ای جهانی است بنشسته در گوشه‌ای. Whoever has some provision from knowledge is a world sitting in a corner. It means you become a replica of the world. He says, after decline of skepticism, which continued up to 3rd and 4th century after Christ, all philosophers in Europe and in the Muslim world, they believed in a kind of dogmatism. They believed in the possibility of having certainty. They didn't question human understanding. And this continued up to the 16th century. which led again to questioning the value of human understanding. There are different reasons, partly because they understood some of the scientific ideas that were there for maybe thousands of years were wrong. You know, you can imagine that then this can, be extended to other things. When people see something which was accepted for lots of years is now proved to be wrong, then they may lose their confidence and they think other things are also perhaps wrong, and we cannot know things for sure. So he says some ideas that for thousands of years were accepted by scientists, then they were proved to be wrong, and this led to losing their trust. He said what happened in ancient Greece in the 5th century before Christ, which led to the formation of Sufism, happened in another form, but similar, in Europe in the 16th century and continued. So now we have ideas similar to the ideas of Sufis and those who were skeptical. And this led to relativism. They had similar ideas, but they were hesitant to say we are Sufis or we are skeptical. They said, there is relative truth. He said, in recent centuries, in European philosophy, many things is about knowledge, about understanding. We said at the beginning of this course that why epistemology has become so important recently. In the past, it was not like an independent field for a study. He says, می توان گفت, this is important sentence, در دوره جدید اعتقاد ارزش مطلق معلومات به نحوی که در قدیم معمول بود به کلی منسوخ شده است. If we want to say something very brief, we can say that in the modern era, the idea that our knowledge, human knowledge, has value, is reliable, helps us to understand the reality which was popular in the past, this idea به کلی منسوخ شده است, is abrogated, is refuted, or they were not able to refute it, but unfortunately it's rejected, this idea. Then he starts with reference to some of the key figures in Western philosophy. He starts with Descartes and continues with other people from rationalist school like Leibniz, Malebranche, Spinoza, and then he mentions empiricists like John Locke and Berkeley, and continues. I was hoping to say rationalists today, but the time is over. Inshallah, we will continue this discussion bi'Iznillah next week. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
احسنتون شیخ ممنون.
خواهش میکنم. May Allah bless you inshallah. سلام علیکم الله.
یه عرض کوچیکی داشتم، ممکنه دست شما درد نکنه.
سلام.
امکان